Well, it looks like we were right. We've been saying that this whole Epstein release would be nothing but theater, that they would find a way to basically hide everything that matters, all while pretending to give us something important. And when I say we, I'm not talking about me specifically. I'm talking about you, talking about me. I'm talking about all of us, the people who saw this for what it was, political theater. Because December 19th was supposed to be the day. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, the one that passed with near unanimous support, it required that the DOJ would publish all unclassified records and documents pertaining to the Epstein investigation. And the law that was passed that Trump signed specifically prohibited withholding anything based on embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. And yet, they still found a way. Okay. And we said they would this whole time, right? I mean, nobody actually thought that the full Epstein files would ever come out, because if it did, it would send shockwaves through the entire world, right? And what they delivered was nothing but redaction theater. They think we're dumb. They think we're all fools. They think that people don't realize that what they gave us is nothing. Because 80% of what was released on December 19th was already mostly in the public record. They just republished court records that have already been existing from different cases. Documents that have been floating around for years have been dressed up as new revelations and released. But that's not what people wanted. And it's obvious now. Everybody's asking the question, what are they hiding? And that's a valid question, right? I'm sure you're asking the same thing. What are they hiding? I mean, I think we kind of know what they're hiding, but the names, the network, the whole thing, how deep it actually goes, and this so-called client list that apparently exists and doesn't exist at the exact same time, because some people are saying, oh, there's no client list. Other people are saying, yes, there is a client list, and we have the documents right here. So what's happening, right? Is there a civil war happening behind the scenes? I think the indication is yes, there is something going on, and the powers that be are fighting this release with tooth and nail. What could possibly justify this level of coordinated obstruction, right? Where both parties, despite the public outcry, seem to be equally motivated to keep this thing behind the curtains, to keep this thing buried forever. What could it be? Well, I think the answer is a little bit darker and a little bit more spiritual than the general public has been led to believe. And there's one survivor, I think her name was Juliette Bryant, and she might have given us the answer. Now, I'm going to play this interview, but real quick, I'm going to talk about it first. So what she described and what she actually witnessed firsthand, it matches testimonies going back thousands of years. Think about that. She saw something that matches the stuff that we read in the Bible. And she described something that most people, the majority of people, would go on to dismiss immediately. But the people who know, the people who actually look at this through the lens of critical thinking, well, it made them perk up a little bit, because what she said matches testimony, like I said, that dates back thousands of years and spans the entire earth. She said that during an encounter in Epstein's bedroom, a room that she described as always being like really dark and cold, she witnessed something spectacular. She witnessed something unbelievable, and something that shakes the core of reality itself. What was that? What did she witness? She said that she witnessed a transformation, a shape-shifting. That's right. Epstein actually turned into something else. Now, before you are like, wait, what are you talking about? This is crazy. I don't want to listen to this crazy stuff. Just hear me out, because this is not an isolated incident, and people have been recording this phenomena for eons. And watch this clip. Here she's going to describe it.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. We've had a conversation several years ago, and I just want to try and put you at your ease. I know you don't particularly feel comfortable talking about this publicly. It's a hard thing for you to talk about. I appreciate you coming back on Uncensored. Just first of all, as one of the
Well, speaking about this matter, because it needs to be touched on.
Yes.
The more people that speak about it, the better. So thank you very much.
Yes. Well, I just
I have high respect for you. I think you're an amazing man. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's just remind our viewers who may not be familiar with your story. Just summarize your experience at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, You know, what happened was I was doing modeling. I was a young girl. I was studying psychology at the University of Cape Town. I started doing modeling, you know, to earn income. I got scouted when I was 14 by elite model management. In fact, my mother wouldn't let me model then. She only let me do it when I was older. But what happened was I was approached at a bar in Cape Town by a girl, and she said that she was here with the King of America. His name was Jeffrey Epstein, and he was here with Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker. She said that Epstein was best friends with Leslie Wexner, who owned Victoria's Secret, and it would be very beneficial for me to meet them for my modeling career. Because I came from Africa, I found a camera there, and also there's flight logs. You know, I found a digital camera, one of those throwaway cameras in the kitchen there. I took a few of them and I took photos. So I've got evidence, and also there's evidence from them flying me there. But you see, a lot of girls who were just walked there to his apartment in Palm Beach, they won't have evidence. So basically, only the girls who have solid evidence have been compensated.
And obviously, Epstein is dead. Do you believe he took his own life?
Not obviously, Piers. It's not obvious. He might be alive. I want to know what those bastards did to me. When I got back from there, I was not okay. I was taken to hospital 10 times with panic attacks through my 20s. I felt I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die every day. I know they did something more to me. Epstein shapeshifted in front of me. It's very hard to understand if you haven't seen it. But I saw it. I want to be lie detected on this. But I've never seen anyone else turn into anything like that. And it happened. It was like a weird hologram, and it had like big black eyes. You know, and I also saw Epstein shapeshift on the island. You know, when I was on the island, I saw Epstein like suddenly, and people have actually asked some pretty good questions recently. It wasn't like I saw him turning like the Incredible Hulk. What happened is, I was, you know, it was when I was taken in the bedroom the one time, and he had like a blanket up to here. And then I looked away and I looked at him, and suddenly it wasn't him anymore. It wasn't like I saw him turning. It was like it was him. And I looked away, and then when I looked back, it wasn't him. It was this weird creature. And then I looked away, and then I looked back, and it was him again. You know, and I can't really explain that. I mean, I can explain it as well as I can, and I can understand. You know what? If someone else told me this, like I keep saying, I wouldn't believe it. I totally wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, this person's either mad or they were on drugs or something. But the problem is that I saw it, and I wasn't on drugs.
Isn't this crazy? Think about this. She said that she was stone cold sober when she saw this transformation happen. She also said that other victims have reported the exact same experiences or similar experiences. So she's not the only one that saw this thing. Not only is she not the only Epstein victim who saw him do similar things, but she's also not even close to the only person in our history as human race that has witnessed these types of things happen, because this is a common occurrence throughout the entire world. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. But I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking this lady's insane. You're thinking this sounds like some sort of science fiction movie, some sort of, maybe it's a trauma-induced hallucination. It's false memories. Maybe something was slipped into her food or her water. Maybe somebody slipped her a Mickey, right? Maybe she was seeking attention. Maybe she made the whole thing up. But I don't think she did, because I had those same exact reactions at first, and I believe in this stuff. Now, I'm not one of those people like David Icke that believes that there's like a race of reptilians. You know, maybe he's right. I don't know, but I'm just not on that same page as he is. But I believe in this woman's testimony, and I actually saw something like that with my own eyes years ago, long before I was saved. I saw something very similar happen. And I'll tell that story later. A lot of you guys have already seen it, but this is what changed my mind about this specific story. And that is that every culture worldwide on planet Earth has documented this same exact phenomenon. Every continent, every major civilization, going back to the earliest human records that we have. So this is not just like a similar occurrence. This isn't something that sounds like what she said. No, it's not just some tradition. No, this is the same thing, guys. This is the same features, the same behaviors, and the same conditions under which these transformations allegedly occur. So there's a cave painting in southern France. I think scholars date it to 13,000 years ago, but that can be debated. It's not about the date that they date this cave painting to. It's about what it depicts. And somebody crawled deep into this cave system. Mind you, it's pitch black in there, and they painted on the wall. Well, what did they paint? Scholars will call it the sorcerer, and it depicts a figure caught in like a mid-transformation. Basically, it has human figures that are blending with animal figures. It's basically twisted between two states of being. And researchers believe it represents like the physical moment of metamorphosis. This is the oldest depiction of what we would now call shapeshifting. And guys, every culture around the world believes in something like this. Shapeshifting. Entities that masquerade as people, entities that use people as masks, that use people as meat suits, so to speak. So whoever drew this painting in the cave thought it was important enough to record for all of history to see. And that's exactly what happened. But that's not the only place that you see stuff like this. But this tradition, it spans the entire world. And from that French cave, you can trace these accounts through every major civilization. Like I said, you can even take it back to ancient Babylon, where the Babylonians documented these encounters with entities that were transforming into something else. And they even built temples to appease them. The Egyptians, they depicted not only their gods with hybrid forms, right? Think about Anubis, but their demons as well, beings of chaos with features that would match what Bryant said Epstein did. So here you have these ancient cultures drawing entities that are shape-shifting from humans to animal, vice versa, some sort of beings that are transforming into something else. And then you have the Greek myth, what is it, King Lycaon or something like that? He transformed into a wolf as some sort of punishment, and basically the first werewolf. And there's also been documented encounters with beings that they call daemons. We know them as demons. And the Bible lays this out as well. We have Ephesians 6:12 that says that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. So what was working behind Epstein, through Epstein, Epstein was just a vessel for this ancient evil. And remember, the book of Revelation talks about the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent, the devil. Again, you have dragon, you have serpent, not metaphorical language. You have specific imagery that has been preserved through prophetic visions. In the Garden of Eden, when Satan tempted Eve, he was called the Nakash in Hebrew. The Hebrew term there for serpent is Nakash. So if Satan, who is a fallen angel, can appear to be a serpent or in serpentine form, so here you have Satan, who's a fallen angel, and according to the Bible was one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful created being in all of existence, he can turn himself into a serpent, just like Epstein did, okay? So was Epstein utilizing these dark spiritual powers? Was there fallen angels possessing him? Because we know that fallen angels can, specifically Satan, can possess people. He possessed Judas. And what happened to Judas? In that exact instance, we would have the same thing that this woman saw Epstein do. A man, Judas, possessed by a spirit, Satan, who looks like a serpent. The Garden of Eden, all right? So this whole thing can connect to itself. I'm not saying that Epstein was some sort of fallen angel. Maybe he was. Maybe he was possessed. I don't know. All I'm saying is that her testimony is very suspicious. And the fact that they are refusing to give us these redacted files, I think it has something to do with what this woman saw. Something about his true nature. Maybe he wasn't just a regular man. And it's clear throughout our human history, most people that ever lived on the earth believed in these things. They believed these things were not only possible, but true. In medieval Europe, for instance, they didn't just believe these accounts, they documented them extensively. For example, you have one called the Canon Episcopi, I believe it's called, from 900 AD. And then you have the witch trials, right? All the different witch trials that happened throughout the 1600s. But there was endless testimonies from back then, from the old times, from the medieval period, of people describing the exact same occurrence that this woman described seeing Epstein transform into. This is basically a consistent testimony that's spread across the entire world. And guys, we're not just talking about medieval Europe here. This goes a lot farther than that. Let's look at the Navajo people, for instance. They have zero connections with medieval Europe. Before the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they had their own, I call them myths, but I don't think they're myths. They had their own stories of people that could transform exactly like the cave painting, exactly like the testimonies that came out in the Middle Ages during these witch trials and during these other things. Testimonies that people saw with their own eyes and that were documented throughout history. The Navajo people, the Anasazi people of ancient Southwest America say the same exact things. But these were called skinwalkers. The legend of the skinwalker coincides with exactly what this woman saw, and it coincides with exactly what is written in the Bible, and it coincides with every culture worldwide. And according to the Navajo tradition, these skinwalkers, they're not born in another realm, another dimension. No, they were once human who gained power through transformation, through specific abilities, and through specific initiations. They imbued themselves with the dark spiritual black magic that exists beyond the veil, basically empowering themselves in a way that they can utilize that power, that dark energy, for their own nefarious purposes. It's a very specific thing. And what's the initiation? What's the specific thing that these Navajo people have to do to become a skinwalker? Well, of course, it's something evil, right? And in this case, we're talking about in order to be imbued with this dark, evil power, you have to murder your own family member. And most occasions, it's a sibling. Stop and think about that, all right? The requirement for gaining this power, this shape-shifting power from the dark side, is betraying your own, is killing your own blood and your own family. What does that even sound like to you? Because it should remind you of something. It reminds me of something. But this reminds me exactly of the Babylonian human sacrifice that people had to give to ancient gods like Moloch. I say gods like small g gods. Moloch was a demon. He demanded child sacrifice. And cultures have been sacrificing people to these ancient deities for millennia. And in the Navajo tradition, the skinwalkers, they're described as having black eyes or black glowing eyes, and something's wrong with their face. It seems wrong. It seems off. Sometimes it's enlarged. Sometimes it's distorted. It's like a hologram. Supernatural speed. They can run super fast. There's so many stories of skinwalkers running through the desert at night, keeping up with cars, basically stalking people who are driving going like 60 miles an hour. They can also mimic. They have the ability to basically like a deep fake, a spiritual deep fake. They can pretend to be somebody. Remember in Terminator 2, when John Connor, he called his mom, but the T-1000 was there. He had the spike in his stepdad or whatever, and he was utilizing his mom's voice, pretending to be his mom, but it was just a Terminator. It was a T-1000. Well, that's what the skinwalkers can do. And not only that, they're able to transform themselves at will, especially during these heightened states of like ritual ceremonies. The darker their deeds are, the darker their ceremonies or their sacrifices are, the more power they can get. And there's even geographical places on Earth where this type of phenomena can be documented more frequently than other places. And Skinwalker Ranch is a perfect example. There have been multiple witnesses that say they've seen shape-shifting entities come out of the ranch. This is a common thing. And no, I'm not just talking about the TV show. There's been reports of this long before the TV show, going back centuries. And the phenomenon continues to this day up there in that ranch because, well, there's probably a portal there, but that's a whole different story. There's even one specific story. The previous owner of Skinwalker Ranch, back when it was called the Sherman Ranch, I think it was the Sherman family. When they first moved onto the ranch, they had a cattle farm. The father and son they heard their cattle freaking out. They went outside and they saw a wolf. They described it. And this is documented in a book. It's been written about several times. It's a true story, according to the Shermans anyway. They saw this wolf that was like huge. It was bigger than a man. It was like the biggest wolf they've ever seen. So they shot it. I think he had a 357 Magnum, if I remember correctly. He emptied the gun into this wolf, and the wolf didn't make a noise. It just turned around and walked away and disappeared into the night. But they claimed that that wolf was acting human-like. It was standing up and it was looking at them directly in the eye, standing on 2 feet. And remember, this wasn't just a regular-sized wolf. It was bigger than a man. So you have this giant animal standing on its feet, and the man empties a 357 Magnum into it and nothing happens. It just walks away. The animal didn't react whatsoever. It got shot several times and just left. It just walked away. And there have been several other sightings at that specific location on Skinwalker Ranch of shape-shifting beings. And furthermore, the man, one of the government whistleblowers, who is one of the guys who's coming out in favor of UAP disclosure, but he said he has a story, and he wrote about this. He talks about this openly, that when he came back from Skinwalker Ranch, something followed him. It was the hitchhiker effect. He called it a wolf man. There was a wolf man, basically a werewolf. What we're talking about here appeared in his backyard. He saw it. And this is a man that's, he calls himself a scientist. I wouldn't go that far, but this is a highly credentialed man who has seen this shape-shifting figure in his backyard. And stories like this transcend boundaries, right? They transcend cultures. It goes beyond specific locations and specific beliefs, and it's become kind of a universal story in our human existence. And it's clear this is the same evil, just under a different name. And I believe Epstein was part of that whole thing. Now, is this the reason why they redacted the files? Because if it comes out that he is part of that whole thing and there was some sort of spiritual power that he was imbued with, well, I think it would be too devastating. So they redacted everything. So they buried it. So they're never going to release those files. And guys, if you believe this witness testimony who saw Epstein's shapeshift, well, it changes everything. Because in that case, Epstein would be an essential figure in this overarching story that goes from the pre-flood world to ancient Babylon, through history, through time itself, until modern times. And it connects our whole past together. So let's return back to December 19th, right? Let's return back to those blanked out pages. And what are they hiding? Maybe they're hiding the names. Maybe they're hiding the billionaires. Maybe they're hiding the people who are still running the country, the people who are behind the stock market, all the hedge fund managers, the CEOs of these major trillion-dollar corporations, politicians, intelligence agencies, whatever it may be. Multiple researchers have documented that people like that are involved with Epstein. So maybe that's why they're redacting it. Maybe it's some sort of institutional self-preservation technique that they're doing. These bureaucrats are covering each other's butts, because throughout decades of neglect, it's starting to come back and bite them. Maybe, right? Maybe it's just cowardice on a scale that we've never seen before, right? Seems plausible. Or maybe it's something else, something darker, something ancient, and it's not the who that's involved, it's the what. Because maybe, just maybe, what they can't tell us, what they can't let us see, is the actual nature of what's happening. And the nature of what's happening, it proves that our reality is not exactly as it appears to be on the surface. Because if Juliette Bryant is telling the truth, and I believe she is, right? And I honestly, guys, I don't know if she is telling the truth. I just believe she is. So who knows? But if she is telling the truth, then you have, thousands and thousands of years of consistent human testimony across every culture that does suggest that Epstein, he wasn't just some trafficker. No, he was something darker, something ancient, and something far more evil than anybody could ever imagine. And I told you that I have a personal story where I witnessed something like this in real life. And yes, I have seen a woman's eyes turn black. And I think it was similar to what this woman saw Epstein do. Now, this was quite a while ago. I think it was 2015. I was working at a nightclub. Let's just say it was a nightclub, right? I was a security guard. And one night, I think it was around 3 a.m, this woman comes in, and we didn't allow women at this nightclub. If women could come in if they were escorted by a man, but we didn't allow women in there by themselves. And she came in, she was trying to get in. I'm like, sorry, I can't let you in. And she's like, oh, I know so and so, let me in, blah blah blah. She's like naming names. I'm like, can't. And I was just strict with her. I wasn't mean or anything. I was just like, sorry, I can't let you in. And no matter what she said, sorry, I can't do it. And so she turned around and she starts walking out. And as she was walking out, she turned around like this and looked at me, and she smiled like this big grin. And when she did that, her eyes were totally black, just blacked out eyes. It was like a split second. She was looking like this, just smiling, big toothy grin, black eyes. And then she turned around and walked out. And what happened was, a few minutes later, there was these taxi cab drivers coming in. And by the way, when that happened, it was like a creepiest thing ever. It was like, I was shocked because I knew what I was seeing, and I didn't know like what to think of it at the time. I was like, "What is going on here?" Just like shocked. It was just like a cold stun. You know what I mean? I just didn't know what to do, so I just stood there like, "Okay, that was so weird." She left. I was so like freaked out by it. I wasn't scared or anything. I was just like shocked. And then a few minutes later, these taxi drivers came in, and the taxi drivers were regulars at that club. Like whenever the bars would close, the taxi drivers would take the people home, and then after that, ours was the last one that was open, so they would all congregate around there. So they would come in basically every night. And this lady, this woman, she knew some of the taxi drivers, so they became her escort. So she came in with them, and when she walked back, she just looked at me. Her eyes were back to normal, but she just looked at me like, haha, I got in anyway, and went and sat down with them. So that was my experience with seeing a woman's eyes turn black. Have you ever had any experiences like that? Have you seen it happen? If you have, put it in the comment. But the bottom line here, guys, is that this is a pattern, right? This is a pattern that we can trace without being repetitive, that we can trace throughout history. And the Bible talks about this. So if this is true, what else is true, right? Does that mean everything else in the Bible is true too? Yes, it does. And I believe God will win at the end. This is a war. This is a spiritual battle. And the Lord, he's going to win. He's going to smite these people and these entities behind these people in the final judgment. It will happen one day. Who knows when it will happen, but the final battle will be between the Lord and them. And they don't stand a chance. They're done. They're going to get thrown into the lake of fire where that's it. They're going to face the second death. And sorry, sucks to be them. You had the truth and you rejected it. What happens to you next is on you. You made the decision. So what do you guys think about this? Do you believe this woman's testimony? Do you believe that she saw Epstein's eyes actually transform and him transform into like a shapeshifter? And if you do, what are the implications of that? Please put it into the comments below. I'm pretty curious to hear what you have to say. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for watching this video, and we will see you guys next time. God bless you all.